Hey guys, it's Loaf. I'm back with our Mad Lightning Runemaster. So this is going to be the final iteration of this build guide. We've made a lot of tweaks since the last video. We hit our goal of 1k solo corruption, and I wanted to just make an all-inclusive guide that has all of the information that you'd possibly need in order to play this character and have success in the end game. This is going to be a very long video, so I'm going to have in-depth timestamps for everything. That way, anything you need for this guide, you can come to the video, you can click the timestamp of where you need to refresh your memory on something, and boom, there will be the information for you to do whatever you need to do. I am going to have a couple alternate planners, so some people aren't going to want to play this version. This version was mainly designed to push high corruption. It's a little bit more button intensive than the previous version. So I'm gonna have some workarounds for that on how to make it less button intensive, or an alternative versions that you can play that will still push 700 corruption just fine, as well as my viewers have been asking me nonstop to make a build planner for like a 4 LP unique item super build that's never gonna happen unless you're on Trade League and just have infinite gold. So I'll include that for you guys as well, just for fun. I'll also have all of the sliders for the planners. That way you can see what points I'm taking when, as well as I'm going to include a leveling build planner for you guys in case you wanted to level as the build. I had to explain it a lot while I was streaming, just kind of the transitions I make while leveling. I think that'll make that a lot smoother for you guys. If you guys do appreciate the content or really like the build, I would greatly appreciate if you would leave a like on the video and maybe consider subbing to the channel. We're getting pretty close to the 1k subs on YouTube, so that would be really appreciated, guys. This has been my best week of content creation ever. After taking a long 2-year break from streaming, we came back swinging. There's been so much love in the community, so I really appreciate all of you guys for making this possible and really helping me piece together this build over the last week and a half. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the details of the build. Alright guys, so the first thing I want to tackle on the build is the skills, and that way you can understand kind of the mechanics of the build and the different things we're taking that's going to help scale. That way when we go into the passive points and the gear that we're using and go over stat priorities, it's going to make sense with how it interacts with the different skills. So our main skill, the bread and butter, what's dealing our damage or allowing us to do damage is Lightning Blast. So it's a lightning skill similar to how Arc works in PoE, or like Chain Lightning in Diablo. You're shooting out this lightning blast, it's going to hit a target and it's going to start chaining to different targets. So in order to see how we level it, there's going to be a little scale here that you can grab and you can pull it, and it's going to show you what points we're taking and when. So the first point that we're going to take in is into Arcing Power. What this does is if you've cast Lightning Blast recently, it's going to chain to additional enemies. So you're going to start out with putting 2 points into there, and then 1 point over to Close Circuit. Close Circuit is going to be helping us with our crit chance and with our single target damage. This is going to allow Lightning Blast to chain to ourselves. It's not going to do damage to ourselves. It's just going to give it the ability to chain. So that way when there's only one target, we're still able to benefit from the chains. And it's also going to be ramping up our crit. So we're going to be scaling pretty heavy cast speed on this build. So this build is going to be hitting really, really fast. And it's going to be able to build up that crit chance quite quickly. So that's where we're going to go into there. For the next levels, we're going to finish capping out the Arcing Power for the extra chains. Then we are going to be putting 1 point into Storm Razor. It's going to increase the base crit of Lightning Blast, but that doesn't really matter, as Lightning Blast isn't what's going to end up doing our damage, and we'll get into that in just a second. Then we're going to be grabbing the 1 point into Lightning Attunement. What Lightning Attunement does is it gives us 5% chance to get Lightning Aegis on hit. Lightning Aegis is a buff. It's going to grant us 50% increased lightning damage, and more importantly, 25% less damage taken. So this is going to be a huge defensive layer for us. Defenses are king in last Epoch, so you're going to hear that over and over. It's going to be a theme of the build there. Defenses are everything. We only need the 5% chance because we're going to be casting so quickly on the build. After that, We're going to put the 1 point over into Searching Influence, increasing the chain range. This is really going to help your Echo clear, just being able to bounce from mob pack to mob pack without having to change your target too often. After that, we are going to be grabbing the 4 points into Overcharge. Overcharge gives us a 24% chance to double cast our Lightning Blast. And then it's going to give us a little bit of crit multi. And then the 1 point into Hypercharge, which is going to give us a 25% chance to quadruple cast. So the more we're stacking that cast speed, the more procs we're going to be getting of double cast and quadruple cast. There's going to be lightning just spraying all over the screen, as you saw at the beginning of the video. After that, we are going to finish taking the rest of the points here. So we're going to be taking 2 travel points into Front Loaded. It's going to give Lightning Blast a little bit of extra damage. We don't care about that. It's mainly to get over to here. This is what makes the build function. Lightning Blast hits have a chance to apply Spark Charge. What Spark Charge is it's a negative ailment that applies a lightning debuff to an enemy, and then after a short duration, it explodes and does AoE lightning damage to everything nearby. This is going to be all of our damage in this build. So Lightning Blast is just the tool in order to apply spark charges, and this is what's going to create that really explodey pop feeling to the build and makes it look so cool. After that, you're going to take the 5 points into Mortal Capacitator. That's going to give us 200% multiplicative damage to the spark charges. And then the least important node that you're only going to be able to get once you grab a couple of the unique items and get some levels to Lightning Blast is right here, Final Spark. So this is going to get rid of some of the delayed damage. So typically when you apply the Spark Charge, I believe it's a 0.7 second delay before the actual explosion occurs. What this is going to do is if the target is already affected by a Spark Charge and you hit him with Lightning Blast again, it's just going to instantly detonate it. That way there's no delay, it's instant damage, just explosions covering the entire screen. For the second skill, we're going to be taking Flame Ward. Flame Ward is one of the best defensive skills that Mage has in its toolkit. So what it does by default is it's going to give us 400 ward when we cast it, and it's going to make you take 30% less damage for a couple of seconds. The first 3 points we're going to be taking is going to be in Dilation. That's going to increase the duration by 36%, allowing us to get that 30% less damage for longer. And then the next 2 points, we're going to take 1 travel point to Fire Aura. This point does not matter at all. We just need to get gain access to Frost Ward. What Frost Ward does is it changes Flame Ward from a fire skill to a cold skill. This is gonna become really important for our next skill, Runic Invocation. We need this skill to be a cold skill. And then after that, we're gonna take a few points here to the side of the tree. So we're gonna take 2 points into Energize. That's gonna give us a little bit of ward per second, but that's mainly to get over here to Prismatic Buffer. That's going to give us 20%, and then pretty soon it'll be 30% once we take some more points into there, less elemental damage taken. Then we're going to be grabbing the 5 points into Barrier. That's going to give us another 40% less hit damage. So as you can see, the common trend with this skill, just a lot of damage reduction that we're able to get here. For the next couple points, we'll grab the last remaining point to Prismatic Barrier for that 30%. And then we'll be taking 2 points into Recollection. That's going to give us 50% ward retention. What ward retention is, or I guess we should first go over what ward is. Ward is that blue barrier that you saw that's covering my health pool. There's various skills or abilities that you can use to gain ward, and then ward by default degens. So you can build up what's called ward retention to slow down that degen rate, so it's not going down as fast. This is a ward stacking build, so we're going to want to slow down that decay as much as we can, so we can build up massive amounts of ward to protect our health pool. So with the 1.0 patch, they nerfed a lot of the spots that we can get ward retention, so it makes it a lot harder to build that up. So we do want to take the 2 points here in order to get some of that back. And then for the remaining points, we are going to be dumping them into Frostguard. Frostguard is going to give us an additional 600 armor while Flame Ward is active. That's going to give us a whole bunch of physical damage reduction, as well as 75% of your armor ends up applying to all of the other damage as well. So that's just going to give us some more damage reduction here. Alrighty guys, the third skill that we're going to be using is Runic Invocation. This is the skill that makes Runemaster. So how Runemaster works, once you gain access to Runic Invocation, whatever element of the skill that you're casting is, it gives you a rune above your head. So if you cast a lightning skill, it's going to give you a lightning rune above your head. If you cast a cold skill, a cold rune. A fire skill, a fire rune. And then, depending on the combination of runes that you have above your head, when you hit Runic Invocation, it is going to cast a specific spell. This is part of the thing that scares away a lot of the newer players from last Epoch into playing Rune Master, because it sounds very complicated. It sounds like you have to do this big scary rotation in order to cast the correct skills. What if you mess it up and you cast the wrong skill and now you're dead? So it's a scary hurdle to get over. With our build, we simplify this greatly, so it is foolproof. You can't really mess it up. As long as you're paying attention, just a couple things. You no longer have to do a rotation in order to have the perfect rune combo. So how we're going to be doing that here is the first couple of points. So we're going to be putting 1 point into a tuned approach. What that's going to do is give you 10 ward when you activate Runic Invocation and refund 10% of the mana. That's more of a travel point than anything. We're going to go over here to inscribe patterns. Again, another travel point. It's going to give you some buffs depending on the runes that you have above your head, such as increased mana regen. That's the only one that's really going to be beneficial to us. But then we're going to be getting into the two big points here. So Author of the Arcana, that is going to refund 100% of the mana cost for Runic Invocation, which is good because we don't really use a lot of mana in our build, and so we don't really have a lot of mana regen. So we don't want stuff that's really costing mana. So that's really nice. It does add a cooldown to the skill. However, that is not very important. We don't need to cast this too often, and we're going to be getting a lot of cooldown recovery to help with that as well. The damage portion of this does not matter, as we're going to get into that in just a second. The next point, Immutable Order. This is what turns Runemaster into an approachable skill for newer players. So instead of gaining a rune based on the element that you just cast, it is going to go off of the first 3 skills on your skill bar. So for instance, on this build, my first 3 skills are Flame Ward, Frostwall, and Flame Rush. Now, as you saw with the Flame Ward skill tree, we do convert some of our skills to be a different element than what they typically are. And that is because of the Runic Invocation skill and with the point into Immutable Order. So how we have it set up is our Flame Ward is actually a cold skill, Frostwall is actually a fire skill, and Flame Rush is actually a cold skill. So no matter what abilities we cast, so if we're spamming Lightning Blast, the runes that are going to appear above our head are going to be cold, fire, cold. Make sure you have these first 3 skills set up this way. That way it is foolproof for your Runic Invocation skill. And then what that's going to do, having a cold, fire, cold skill, is it is going to cast a barrier on us. That's going to be a frost barrier that gives us a few things. So here I have a list of all of the Runic Invocations. So the Runic Invocation that we're casting, so Cold, Fire, Cold, is Riowind's Frostguard. What that's going to do, that barrier is going to make you take 30% less damage taken. That's massive, especially on top of the Flame Ward that we're already getting. And then on top of that, it's going to give you 100 ward as like a burst amount of ward, and then 3 extra ward per intelligence. We are an intelligence stacking build. It's very easy to get like 130 intelligence on this build, or even more than that. So it's going to give you a huge burst of ward all at once, and then it's going to be giving you ward granted every 0.4 seconds. So it's giving you 14 ward plus an additional 0.5 ward per intelligence. So again, that's going to be a lot of ward per second. This is the ability that hard carries our build to that 1000 corruption. It will also make it so as soon as you unlock Runemaster and you can spec into Immutable Order and get access to Riowind's Frostguard, you are basically immortal for the rest of the campaign. As long as you're clicking it on cooldown, nothing is going to kill you. Go stand in whatever you want. Go face tank any boss mechanic. You're not going to die. This is part of the reason why this build is so hardcore viable as well, because this is just a massive defensive layer. So this is going to be really, really strong. All right, so let's go back into Runic Invocation here and leveling up the skills. So we grabbed our Immutable Order. We wanted to beeline that, get Immutable Order as soon as possible. That way we don't have to think about what runes we're casting. After that, what we're going to be grabbing is the 4 points into Adept Runescribing. That's going to give us 32% increased cooldown recovery speed on this. Once the build is finally put together and you have a lot more of your stat priorities in order, you're actually going to end up getting 100% uptime on that cold barrier, giving you that massive damage reduction. So this is going to help with that, giving us that 32% cooldown recovery. Next, we're going to be grabbing the 4 points into Transcriber of Power. What this is going to do is it's going to give us +8 flat spell damage and then +8% cast speed. So that's really, really big. We're a cast speed stacking build, and then all of the flat damage is going to help just amp up all of our spells. So that's good. The rest of the points for this tree aren't really a huge impact. I'm going to cover this here right now because I get this all the time. I get tons of questions on stream where everyone's like, why don't you take this point? Why don't you take that point? It's really important to know that our Runic Invocation skill is a defensive skill. It doesn't do damage. So most of these other tags, these other abilities here on the tree are for only damage Runic Invocations. It doesn't apply to our Lightning Blast. It doesn't apply to our Spark Charges. It only applies to the spell that's being cast by Runic Invocation. So that's why we don't take a lot of stuff like Elemental Lore that gives you this infinite amounts of elemental penetration. Doesn't apply to us. So I just want to get that out of the way first, because I know there's going to be a lot of questions for that. So for the next points here, we're going to be maxing out Attuned Approach. That's just going to give us extra ward every time we cast it. The cooldown ends up coming up pretty often, and then it's also going to give us extra of that mana refunded, which actually ends up giving us mana since we already have a 100% mana refund here. So it's kind of just a little funny thing that helps us get mana. The next 3 points we're going to go over is into Runeslinger. This is going to help the cast speed of Runic Invocation itself. We're stacking cast speed again on the build. It's going to make this almost like an instant cast, just with getting that boosted cast speed. And then whatever our current mana is when we do cast this, it's going to give 15% of that as ward. So it's just a nice little chunk of ward on top of that. Then we'll be putting in the additional points into Inscribed Patterns, just for that little bit of mana regen, just to help sustain, since we don't really get mana regen anywhere else on the build. All of the mana regen comes from this ability. And then the last 2 points is into Word of Herot. The reason for that is we're going to have a couple of other abilities that go off of Chill Chance. When Runic Invocation expires, it does technically do a small little explosion. The explosion does hit enemies. It's going to do almost 0 damage, but it will apply that Chill Chance. So that just gives a little bit of chance to apply the Chill debuff onto some enemies, which we'll get into later on why that's important. So that is Runic Invocation in a nutshell. I know it's kind of complex in nature and how it works, but in the actual playing of the build, very simplified because of Immutable Order. As long as you set up your skill bar like mine, you're not even going to have to think about it. And then one last thing before I forget, one of the major changes from the original iteration of this build going into the new version of the build, I did end up dropping the 1 point out of Enigma. Those of you guys that have been playing the build or had seen the previous video, what Enigma was doing is it was changing our Runic Invocation ability into a teleport type ability, making it have the traversal tag on the skill. We are going to end up taking a different traversal skill, and it's very, very important that you do not take Enigma. With Enigma, it is going to give Runic Invocation the traversal skill, so whenever we use our new traversal skill, Flame Rush, it will automatically put Runic Invocation on cooldown, allowing you to not gain access to that frost barrier. So make sure, if you have been already playing the build and you're switching over to this version, take out that point of Enigma. It will greatly impact the build. So as I get to the changes that we are making to the build, I will try to point them out there. That way, if you have already been playing the build there, you can make those appropriate changes. But please do not take Enigma in this form of the build. For the 4th skill, we're going to be taking Frost Wall. What Frost Wall does is it creates this large wall of ice on the screen there, and it persists for 6 seconds. Enemies that walk through it are end up getting chilled. The base effect doesn't really matter. We're going to be changing what that actually ends up doing. So if you remember me talking about Runic Invocation and changing elements of skills, the first 3 points we're going to be taking 1 point to Marching Winter. That's going to increase the area of the wall, making it a little bit longer, and then increasing the duration. But more importantly, we're going to be taking Pyroglass. This is what's going to convert Frost Wall over to a Flame Wall instead. It's going to make it a fire skill, so it's going to be able to proc our Runic Invocation, having that Cold Fire Cold skill. And then more importantly, we have the point here, Brand the Invaders. What this does is if you place Frostwall directly on top of an enemy, such as a tanky rare monster or a boss, it is going to apply a brand to them. The particular brand here is the brand of Trespass. The brand of Trespass doesn't really matter, it just matters that it is a brand. So it makes them take more damage per Ignite chance. We don't have any Ignite chance. We just need it to have a brand on these tanky monsters. We'll get into why that's important once we go through the passive tree for Runemaster, but just keep that in mind. This is applying a brand for us. So next up, the points that we'll be taking are up here at the top of the tree. So we're going to take 1 travel point to Biting Limit. We don't care about that node. What we do care about is Lightning Rod. So what that does is when you cast Frostwall, it has 2 pillars on each side of the wall. One of those pillars is now going to start casting Lightning Blast for us. If you forget, Lightning Blast is our main damage skill, and it's going to be applying full spark charges for us when it's being cast by Frostwall. So this is turning it basically into a totem skill, like from Path of Exile, where you place the wall down, it just starts automatically casting our main damage ability and starts killing everything for us. Really nice to help out our AoE and single target DPS just by throwing it around whenever there's like a tanky mob or there's a large pack of monsters there. The 1 point to charge pylons, so the Frostwall's outer pillars cast Lightning Blast as well, every other second. And then the 2 points into Amplified Currents, this is going to increase the frequency at which it's casting Lightning Blast. The longer the wall lasts, the more frequent it's going to cast Lightning Blast for us until it expires. So you don't want to be constantly casting the new walls there if you're still attacking the same monster. You want to leave it as long as it can until it expires. It's going to max out at 160% increased frequency of casting Lightning Blast for you. And then after that, we'll put the 1 extra point over into Lightning Rod to max that out. And then we will be going over here. So we'll be putting 1 point to Crystal Protection to begin with. That's going to give us a little bit of ward anytime you pass through the wall yourself. So you can place it on the ground, you can walk through it, or you can use your movement skill to shoot you through it. It's going to give you a little bit of mana, and it's going to give you a little bit of ward. The next point here, Purifying Gate. So every build in Last Epoch, in order to push really high corruption, needs some sort of cleanse ability. What cleanse does is it pulls negative ailments off of you. For instance, if you have a whole bunch of poison stacks on you and you walk through your wall with Purifying Gate, it pulls off all of those poison stacks instantly. That's going to apply to bleeds, ignites, other debuffs that are applying to you. Really massive defensive skill here for you. So grab that. And then next, we're going to put the 2 points into Boosted Kickoff. What that's going to do is if you walk through that wall, or if you use your traversal skill to go through the wall, it's going to give you Frenzy and Haste. What Frenzy does is it's going to give you a buff that gives you 20% increased cast speed. Like I've said 10 times already through this build, we're a cast speed stacking build. 20% cast speed for free is pretty dope. And then also it's going to give us Haste, which gives us 30% movement speed. So after we zip through the wall, we're going to run really fast for a couple seconds after. The duration for the Frenzy and Haste, a lot of people have been asking questions about this. They thought it was bugged. If you create the wall and you immediately walk through it, it's only going to give you the buff for about 1 second. But if you cast the wall in front of yourself and then use your traversal skill to zip you through it, it's going to take you a couple seconds to get there. And the maximum buff, based on how long the wall's been there, is going to be 4 seconds. So the longer the wall's there before you walk through it, it's going to give you a longer Frenzy and Haste buff. So keep that in mind. All right, now for the next points here, we are going to be grabbing the 2nd point to Marching Winter. So extra duration, extra area, but that's mainly to get access to Chilled Touch. What Chilled Touch does is you deal more multiplicative damage, so not just increased percent damage, but more multiplicative damage to chilled enemies while you have an active Frost Wall. So it's not just the Frost Wall damage itself, but as long as there is a Frost Wall somewhere on the map that is currently active, you are getting that 14% multiplicative damage to chilled enemies. Pretty much every enemy we attack is going to be chilled. We'll be getting into that once we get to our passive tree. But that's really big there for us. And then for the last points here, we're going to put 1 point into protection of the apostate. What that does is if enemies pass through your frost wall, you're going to get 5 ward per enemy that pass through. That's mainly to get access over to Shelter of the Chef. What that does is when the enemy passes through the wall for the first time, and it has existed for at least 0.2 seconds when they pass through, you're going to gain ward equal to a small portion of the enemy's maximum health. So you're going to get 1% of the enemy's health to ward ratio, up to a maximum of 200 ward. So if you cast this like on a boss that's really tanky, that's instantly going to give you 200 ward. It's really nice. Just helps you give you a good chunk of ward, especially when you're going through echoes. If you have like a pack of monsters that's running after you, you drop a frost wall, you have 10 monsters walk through there. That's a huge chunk of ward that you're getting. You're getting that 200 ward per enemy. So really nice defensive layer there. The last thing I want to go over in Frostwall, for those of you guys have been playing the build, you're going to notice I did take out the point out of Wall of Glyptic Art. What this used to do is it would cast Runebolt for us. I'm sure you've noticed by now on the skill bar and the last skill that we have left to go over, we took Runebolt out of the build. So the reason why we did that, what Runebolt mainly gave us is it allowed us to apply a couple of more negative ailments that's going to be useful for our unique wand that we use for this build. We'll go over that part later. But then it also gave us a stack of a buff called Runeweaver that ended up giving us a little bit more multiplicative damage. So it was like 21% multiplicative damage, I believe. We did end up dropping that so we could get a different traversal skill. I'll get more into why that skill is better as we break down the skill itself and go through the tree, but that is something we change. So if you are using this version of the build and you were playing the old version prior, make sure that you do drop the 1 point out of Wall of Glyptic Art. And for the final skill, we have Flame Rush. So Flame Rush is a skill that is going to be taking the place of Runebolt, and we'll get into why. So Flame Rush is a traversal skill that you have to hold down. When you hold it down, it's going to turn you into a ball of fire, and then you are going to zip across the screen. The longer you hold it down, you are going to progressively start moving slower. So there's a certain point that you'll kind of get the feel for where you just kind of want to let go. That way you're not moving super slow. While you're in Flame Rush, though, you are going to be taking 40% less damage. This changing to this ability is going to make our clear speed significantly better. We're going to be able to zip through monoliths so much faster. That was a few things that people were complaining about with the previous build, is that it did move a little bit slower. The clear was really good and the damage was really good, but for movement, it did take us a little bit longer to actually run through all the different monoliths. This completely eliminates that sluggish feeling. We're going to be zipping through all over the place. It's going to make it easier to dodge boss abilities. If they're sending some kind of meteor at you or some big AoE, you can just zip right out of it. It has a very low cooldown at 3.5 seconds by default, on top of the fact that we're stacking a whole bunch of cooldown recovery later on the build that I'll show you. So it ends up only being like a 1.5 or 2 second cooldown with fairly good gear. So you're going to have access to this all the time. Now, how we are going to want to spec this out here is the first couple points. We're going to put 1 point into Fiery Overload. That's going to give you Frenzy on the duration. This is more just a travel point. It's not that impactful, as you can actually use this movement skill to go through your flame wall, and it's going to give you the Frenzy proc from the flame wall itself. So as you saw in the gameplay, I normally put the wall in front of myself, and then I flame rush through it. Then we're going to take the 1 point into Lunar Protection. That's going to give us ward per second that we're in Flame Rush, as well as 60 ward after we leave it. We'll take 1 point into Energy Equivalence here. That's going to turn it from a Fire skill to a Lightning skill. And then the important node here, Snowballing. This is going to turn it from a Lightning to a Cold skill. So that's going to complete the first 3 skills on our skill bar. That's going to activate our Runic Invocation properly of having cold, fire, cold, is by taking this node. So that's why we want to rush to this node first. After that, we are going to be taking the 3 points into Lunar Eclipse. This is the main reason that we are switching to this skill. The Rune Bolts obviously gave us more damage, but like I said at the very beginning of the video, defenses are king in last epoch when it comes to pushing high corruptions. Once we started getting to like 700-800 corruption, we started taking a lot more damage. And the main thing that kills you in this game at high corruptions is damage over time, specifically poison damage and then kind of bleed damage, but mainly poison damage. So what this does is you take 18% less damage while you're in Flame Rush. So that's on top of the already 40% less damage that you're taking, and then double that applied to damage over time effects. And then the King node here, Celestial Guidance. So 45% of the duration that you're in Flame Rush persists, the buff persists after you leave Flame Rush. So we're getting that 18% and then the double effectiveness against damage over time after we leave Flame Rush for a couple seconds. That's massive. It's a huge defensive layer that we're able to add on top of our already super layer defensive kit, just making us really, really tanky. Even at 1,000 corruption, we're still very tanky to most abilities. So this is the main reason why we dropped Runebolt. Runebolt's still very viable until like 700 corruption. Then you start really feeling those damage over times. You might want to start thinking about switching over to this version of the build for that to help kind of compensate for it. The next 3 points we're going to be taking over to Solar Rush. This is going to increase the speed at which you travel inside of Flame Rush and the range. The reason why we take those, obviously moving faster is good, but it's going to keep us in Flame Rush longer for, we can go, a screen or two away, and so that's going to increase the duration of the buff from Celestial Guidance. So that's why we're going to take those ones next. And then after, we're going to take 1 point into Branding Cold. This is another way that we can apply brands to enemies. So it's going to apply the Brand of Subjugation, which gives you increased damage for 1% chill. We don't care about what the actual brand does. It doesn't really do all that much, because I believe it applies the actual damage over time effect on it. Which is going to do almost no damage, but it's applying a brand for us, which we're going to get into again on the Runemaster passive tree. We get a buff from applying brands to enemies, so that's big there. Then we're going to take the 3 points into Blazing Flux. This is going to make it cost less mana, because we don't really have a lot of mana regen, so we don't want our abilities to cost a lot of mana, and then it's going to give us 9% cooldown recovery speed. So that's pretty big. And then for the remainder points, these are kind of just going to be filler points. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to max out the Lunar Protection, so we're getting extra ward per second. The ward's pretty nice. We get the extra Frenzy duration just in case we don't dash through a Frost Wall. We're still getting Frenzy when we come out. And then the last point we're going to be putting into Ember Wake. Ember Wake is just a damage ability after you leave a Flame Rush that's going to shoot out a bunch of little mini projectiles. The main reason for it is it's just counting as hits against enemies. It's not going to do a lot of damage, but what it will do is apply like our Armor Shred chance. It's going to apply our different negative ailments. That's going to go into effect when we go over our weapon that we're using. So it's just a little bit of extra benefit. We didn't really have anywhere else to put the point. Do not take the point into Epilogue. A lot of people are coming in and being like, hey, why don't you take Epilogue? We use Runic Invocation. This is going to make that automatically cast for us. That's going to be really good. The downside of it is it adds 125% increased mana cost to Runic Invocation. You will be out of mana instantly if you're using this. It is very, very hard to sustain the mana cost from this, and in order to do it, we'd have to drop a whole bunch of stats on our gear into mana sustain, and that's just going to make our character way less effective. So do not take Epilogue. If you're having mana issues, you're either probably spamming Frostwall or you accidentally took this node. So just make sure you don't take that. But that's why we changed over to using this setup with Flame Rush. It's going to be way faster. We're going to be tankier. So it's just a win-win. We lose a tiny bit of damage, but it's really not that big of a deal. Alright, now that we've gone over all the skills and you guys have a base understanding on how the build is going to function, the different abilities we're going to use, we're now going to start breaking down the passive points and how those interact with the various skills that we've chosen for the build. So to start us off, we have to take 20 points into the base mage tree in order to gain access to the other ascendancies here that are available. So for the first 8 points, we're going to put them into Arcanist. That's going to give us +8 intelligence, and then a decent amount of fire and lightning res. Now, I had a lot of questions on the previous build on why I'm not taking Elementalist. The reason why is it's kind of a new player trap in order to take these points. 7% increased damage isn't actually a lot. That happens at the beginning of the calculation for how much damage each spell hit's going to do. And so it's not actually 7% damage. It's 7% of a very small number that it's adding on there. So the big things that we're looking for are stuff that give you more spell damage, which happens at the end of the damage calculation, or flat damage. Whereas intelligence is going to give us 4% increased lightning damage, as well as it's also going to give us 4% ward retention. And through some of the other passive nodes that we're going to be taking and some of the items we're going to be equipping, we're going to be transforming intelligence to give us a whole wide variety of stats on top of that. So we're really going to try to focus on getting intelligence everywhere we can. It is the #1 most important stat for this build, and it's going to be a repeating thing throughout the rest of the build you're going to see. Any piece that can get intelligence should get intelligence. So we're going to take the first 8 points there, and then we are going to be taking the 1 point into Scholar. Health is actually very important for our build. Even though we're a ward build, we're going to use an item later on that's going to convert some of our maximum health over to wards. The more health we get, the more ward we're getting as well. And then we're going to take 1 traveling point here into Reactive Ward. This is going to give us access to a node later on. Next, we will be taking the 5 points into Mage Flurry. It's going to give us the 15% cast speed. Sadly, the bonus doesn't apply to our Flame Rush, the cooldown recovery speed. It's only for teleport, but the cast speed is still really strong. And then to finish off our 20 points into the base Mage Tree, we're going to be taking the 5 points into Warden. So that's going to give us the 50% ward retention. Like I said, we try to get that ward retention where we can, since they did nerf the different spots that we can get access to ward retention. And then that will finish up the base Mage Tree. Next up, we're going to be going into the Runemaster tree. Our first goal on the Runemaster tree is to get access to Frostwall. In order to do that, you need to spend 15 points into the Runemaster tree. So for the first 5 points, we're going to be putting them into Unsealed Mana. What Unsealed Mana does, it gives us a little bit of flat mana. It's going to give us more cast speed, again, really good. And then if you put 5 points into it, it gives you a bonus. So whenever you directly use 3 skills in a row that cost 0 mana, you gain a burst of a burst of mana and ward. And then this effect has a 3-second cooldown. So our Lightning Blast costs 0 mana. So every 3 times we cast it, it's going to give us a little burst of mana that's going to help our mana regen, since we don't really have any in the build. And it's going to give us 45 ward. So really good first 5 points there. And then what that's also going to give us access to is this next node here, Arcane Focus. So again, +8 intelligence, super, super strong. And then we're getting ward gain on direct spellcast, except this one doesn't have a cooldown proc. So because we are attacking super, super fast, every time we get a Lightning Blast that goes off, we're getting 32 ward. So it's a really solid defensive layer there for us. And then for the next 2 points, since we're just 2 shy of the 15 for Frostwall, we're going to be getting Runeward Cataclysm. What that's going to do is give us 24% increased critical strike chance. Later on, we'll finish getting the points there to get the bonus, but right now our main focus was just getting access to Frostwall. So now that allows us to be able to specialize into Frostwall, and we will start working on the Sorcerer part of this the tree here. So the reason why the Sorcerer tree is so important is it gains us access to Calculated Destruction. So now it's going to give us 5 extra intelligence, which is really strong, but the bonus for it is increased spell critical strike chance per intelligence. So every point of intelligence is now giving us 3% spell crit. We're going to be getting intelligence everywhere, so that's a whole bunch of free crit chance for the build. After we put the 5 points there, we are going to be putting 5 points into Arcane Momentum. When you cast a spell, you gain a stack of Arcane Momentum for 2 seconds, refreshing the duration of all existing stacks. And then that gives us a 5% increased cast speed. So that's 25% cast speed, basically, for the Arcane Momentum there, which is really strong. And then next, what we'll be grabbing is the 6 points into the Essence of Celerity. What that's going to do is give us the increased spell damage per stack. So that's going to give us a little bit of extra percentile spell damage. So with the 6 points, it's going to give us 12%. And then while we're at maximum stacks, we're going to get 10% movement speed as well. And then we're going to put 1 point into Whirling Snow. What this is going to allow us to do is add chill chance to our attacks. Even though we're a lightning build, it's going to apply that chill chance, and that chill chance is going to proc the multiplier on the damage from our Frostwall that we had talked about earlier. So That will be really useful to get that extra damage. It's also going to apply slows, and it counts as a negative ailment on a target, which is going to be important when we talk about the weapon that we use for this build. We're going to put 1 travel point right here into the increased damage and the shock chance with lightning skills. And then we are going to be filling out a couple more of those intelligence points for that bonus intelligence, just so we can get over to Riftbolt, where we're going to be spending the next 5 points. What Riftbolt does is going to give us 15% lightning penetration, so we're going to penetrate through the monster's resistances, and then on top of that, we're going to get 1.5% of our lightning damage Leech's health. Leech on this build is very important to get it at least in this place and one other place later on, because we are going to be using an item that sacrifices a percentage of our current health every time we cast. And so we need some way to counteract that and be able to get the life back. After that, that's going to finish out all of our points in the Sorcerer tree, and then we're going to start moving back over to the Runemaster tree. Now that we're back over to the Runemaster tree, we're going to be grabbing 6 points into Mental Catalysis. So the reason why is we're again getting more intelligence, but also it's going to give us reduced bonus damage from crits. So that's going to make all the critical strikes against us do 48% reduced bonus damage. That's going to be really, really strong. Every single build in this game either needs to get try to get 100% reduced bonus damage taken from crits, or it needs to get 100% crit avoidance. So getting half of that pretty much for free just on the passive tree is a very strong passive option. And then also just getting that intelligence on top of it is just a win-win. And then for the next 6 points, we're going to be going to the Inscribed Instruments. So we're going to be using a wand with this build. So that's an extra 72% crit multi for free. So that's a lot of crit multi. It's hard to get crit multi in a lot of places, so we're going to take it where we can get it. And then next up, we're going to be grabbing over the extra points in Runeward Cataclysm. What that will do, now that we have the bonus on top of the 60% critical strike chance, is whenever you critically strike an enemy, you gain Runeward Cataclysm for 6 seconds, which grants you more damage multiplicative with other modifiers. So again, better than just percentage, we're getting a multiplicative modifier to enemies that are on low health. So that's an extra 15% multiplicative damage there against low health enemies. And then that's any enemy that's below 30% health. And then for the next points here, the next 8 points, we're going to be putting it into Ancient Inscriptions. So that's going to be another 8 intelligence for the build. And then this is one of the other points that's going to make our intelligence more worthwhile to stack. So now, with the bonus on this, we're going to be gaining 1% cooldown recovery speed per 4 intelligence. So this is going to help all of those defensive abilities come up faster, such as Flame Ward and your Runic Invocation. Those are going to be a lot more accessible for us because we're already stacking so much intelligence with that cooldown recovery we're now getting. Next up, we're going to put 1 point into the Runeward Hurricane. What that does is it has a 20% chance to proc and give us 10 flat spell lightning damage. Since we're attacking so fast, that 20% chance is going to be constantly procced on us. We should have 100% uptime as long as we're attacking something. So 10 flat damage for free basically is a pretty good deal. Next, we're going to put the 5 points into the Decree of the Burning Wind. What that's going to do is it's going to give us 5% more damage to bosses and rares. Like I said, that more is the key word there. That's going to come at the end of the damage calculation. It's going to be a lot stronger. And then on top of that, it has a 5-point bonus that this effect is doubled if you have an active Raw Rune or if you've passed through a Frost Wall recently. We're going to have both of those things triggering constantly. So we are using a Cold Fire Cold Rune invocation. So we're pretty much always going to have a Fire Rune, as well as we're going to be passing through Frost Walls constantly. So that should always be up. And then for the next part of the build, we're going to put 1 point over here just to gain access to this last row for now. So what this does is after you use a traversal skill, your next non-channel spell gets a little bit of extra damage. We don't really care about this too much. We're casting so fast that one extra spell isn't going to make a big impact, but this is going to be a required point to get to a later passive. And then after we've got access to this last row, we're going to be putting 4 points into the Jagged Veil. This is going to make it so we gain ward every time we critically strike a target. Now, that does count the crits on the chains for Lightning Blast, so each cast could end up, critting 4 or 5 times and giving us that 4 ward on crit. And then on top of that, it has a bonus here where you have more critical strike multiplier, and that's not just increased critical strike multiplier, that's a multiplicative increase on there. So we're getting more crit multi per 100 ward versus bosses. And then that caps out at 20% more crit multi. I'm sure at the beginning of the video you saw I'm able to get up. Most of the time I'm like around 10, 11,000 ward. Against bosses, I can get to like 17,000 ward. So we're going to hit that max crit multi most of the time there. And then for the next points, we're going to be putting them over here into Celestial Doom. Now, if you guys recall, we had a couple different things that were applying brands to targets. So we had the Frost Wall that if it's put on top of an enemy, it's going to apply a brand. And on top of that, our Flame Rush, when we finish our Flame Rush, it causes an explosion that applies a brand as well to enemies. So this is where that's going to come into play. So branded enemies are afflicted by that are afflicted by a brand. You get a bonus damage. You deal more spell damage to branded bosses or rare enemies, and you gain ward when you hit a branded boss or a rare enemy of the spell. So that's going to give us another 28 ward on hit against tanky mobs, as well as the more multiplier of 7%. And then to top that off, it also gives us +7 flat spell damage, which is really strong. And then for the next points, this is where the Never Late passive is going to come into play. It's going to give us access to Rune of Dilation. After using a traversal skill, you gain increased cast speed and movement speed for a short duration. So that's going to give us an additional 10% cast speed and move speed for 4 seconds. We're going to be casting Flame Rush every, typically 3 or 4 seconds. So this should be up 100% of the time as long as we're utilizing that traversal skill. And then for the remaining 8 points, we're going to be throwing them into Sphere of Protection. The reason why we don't take these earlier is because we have so much damage reduction in the early game, we're already basically immortal. The only time we need the additional damage reduction is once we start pushing really heavily into Corruption. In which case, that should be about the time you're getting these points anyways, once the Corruption levels are starting to get high. What this is going to do is give you 48 additional health, and then you're going to take 6% multiplicative less damage from ignited, shocked, or chilled enemies. All of our enemies are going to be shocked and chilled. It doesn't double stack, but it's still going to be a 6% less damage taken multiplicative. So that's going to be really strong. And then that will wrap up all of the passive points for you. So again, if you guys need to see the order, make sure you use the little scroll here. It will show you which order to take them in, just so you can really min-max it while you're leveling. Alrighty guys, so now that we've gone through all the skills and the passives and you're starting to see how the synergies work in the build, we're going to start going over the gear. Now I want to go over the unique items first, as they're going to have some interesting mechanics in them that's going to help scale the build further, and then I can go through the rest of the gear. And then later on in the video, I'm going to show you how to target farm each of the unique items and what order you're going to want to actually farm everything, as well as where to target farm the various blessings for the build. So the first unique item I want to look at is the Enigma Offhand Catalyst. Now, this is an insane offhand for the build. As I was saying earlier, all of our damage doesn't come from Lightning Blast. It actually comes from Spark Charge, and this is a Spark Charge Catalyst. So first line there, 10 to 12% chance to apply Spark Charge and hit. We already have 30% chance on the Lightning Blast skill tree. Now we're getting an extra 10 to 12 on there. And then the very big line here, +2 flat lightning damage for Spark Charge per intelligence. Like I was saying earlier, should be realistic at like 130, 140 intelligence. That's 280 flat damage that you're getting for your Spark Charge. To give you an idea, the highest flat item that you can really get would be like a two-handed staff, and you're going to get like 120 something flat damage. So you're getting more than double what the highest weapon would be in the game to give you flat damage just from this offhand here. So insane scaling, should multiply your damage through the moon once you get this to drop. None of these uniques are required for the build, guys. The unique items really only help push the build further to try to push, past that 300 corruption standpoint. You should be able to get to 300 corruption without a single unique item on here. This is just how you're going to scale that really heavy into the end game. So on top of the flat lightning damage, it's also going to give us increased Spark Charge explosion area. So Spark Charges can shotgun. So if I hit somebody with a Lightning Blast and it chains to 5 other enemies next to them, and it applies a Spark Charge on like 2 or 3 of them, it's going to shotgun, so each of the monsters are getting hit by 2 to 3 spark charges there, especially with that increased area of effect. So really, really strong. And then the last line that actually applies to us is the +1 to level of lightning skills. That's going to give you extra levels to put your skill trees on a couple of those abilities. So that's how we hit over that maximum 20 levels that we can typically get on skills. We get +1 lightning here, and then we're going to get a couple extra spots to give us skill levels. The next item I want to talk about is the Twisted Heart. Now, the Twisted Heart is our defensive item. This is what's going to allow us to survive super heavy corruptions. So what it does is it gives us 8% of our current health is converted to ward when you directly cast an elemental spell. We're casting really fast. So we're constantly proccing 8% of our health into ward. So the higher health pool that you have, the more ward that you're getting for every cast. So that's how we get to those really high ward numbers. Most of it is coming from Twisted Heart. On top of that, it's going to give us +1 to level of all of our elemental spells. It's going to give us 16% increased cast speed, and the implicit, it can give us up to 20% increased health to give us a higher health pool, so we can convert more of that to ward. And then how we're going to compensate for all of the extra health that we're sacrificing is the point in the sorcerer tree that gives you lightning leech as health. And then on top of that, you can eventually get a blessing that we'll get into later that gives you spell damage leeched as health. Between those two different leeches, it should completely offset the drain there that Twisted Heart is giving you. Now, the next unique item that's really big is the Mad Alchemist Ladle Wand. So it may look a little wonky at first because it's a really low level wand. It's a level 17 wand, so it only gives us 16 flat damage. However, we're making up for that by using the Enigma. That extra almost 300 flat damage well surpasses any wand in the game, but the benefits of running the Mad Alchemist Ladle is two different things. So one, you get 6% more spell damage per negative ailment on a target. So what's a negative ailment? That's the chance to slow on spell hit that this weapon has, chance to apply frailty on spell hit, chance to shred armor, electrify, chance to poison, chance to shock that we're already getting, chance to chills. That's 7 of them right there. And then those the brands that we're applying on enemies from the previous skills, those count as negative ailments as well. So that gives us 9 right there. So that's past the cap of 8 that we can get to. That's going to give us a whole bunch more spell damage there on targets. And then the really big line is 1% cast speed per 2 intelligence. So now our intelligence is giving us yet another damage stat. It's now giving us cast speed on top of that. So again, we're getting like 130, 140 intelligence. So just divide that by 2, and that's how much cast speed that the wand is going to be adding for us late game. So an absolutely insane damage item. So until you can use that, normal ones work fine. I'm going to show you some replacements for all these unique items and what you can use until you get them. But this is going to be a huge damage spike for you once you do get this drop. And then the last unique item that I use on the build is the Strand of Souls. So the only stat that really matters on this belt is ward retention. So you can get up to 70% ward retention, which I said, like I was saying earlier, is a very hard stat to get these days. So 70% ward retention is amazing to be able to get on there. Now, the other thing I do want to address, you guys are looking at this build planner, you're seeing all these red stats on top of it. Those are all legendary stats. So that's what happens when you get an item, a unique item that has legendary potential on it. You can slam it together with an Exalted item. Exalted items are these purple background items that have a mod on it that's at least a tier 6 or a tier 7. So the reason why I have 4 stats on here is not because I expect you guys all to get 4 legendary potential items on there. It's more for me to show you the important stats that you can slam on these items. The highest LP item, which stands for legendary potential, by the way, guys, in case you're not picking that up, the highest LP item I have on my build is 2 LP. I don't have any super crazy broken items on the build, and I'm pushing over 1,000 corruption. So you don't need this. So how I have it tiered out is the stat that says tier 6 on it, so little t and then the number on the right-hand side of the stat, that's the highest priority to try to get on here. So for the Strand of Souls, you really want to try to get cooldown recovery. And then the next one in line is the T5, Hybrid Health. That's a really good stat. I would go for that. Next would be Increased Lightning. Next would be or the Cleanse on potion use. So that's how I have all of these statted out. So if you need to see what the best stats are to get on the Legendary Slam, that's how you know what to prioritize. So Mad Alchemist Slate, I want to prioritize cast speed, then crit multi, then shock chance, then lightning pen. We look over at the Enigma. I want to prioritize cast speed, then crit multi, then 2 reses. The reses don't matter as much here on which ones you get. You can mix and match them. But typically on this build, we get most of our elemental resistance from our idols. So I'm going to focus on like necrotic res or void res or physical res. And then the same thing from heart, we're going to focus on getting intelligence, then cast speed, then 2 different resistances on there. So that's why I have them set up as the 4 legendary potential items on here, just so you guys can see what the different priorities are. Now, let's say that you don't have these unique items yet, and you're trying to see what should I use in the meantime until I farm these. So I set this up here for you guys as well, just so you can take a look at some alternatives. So if you don't have the Enigma yet, I would just use a Catalyst that gives you spell critical strike chance as the implicit, because that's going to be base crit. The Crystal Skull is also going to give you intelligence and ward retention, so it's a really good option. And then just look for something that gives you like cast speed, crit multi, and then some resistance on there. As far as the wand, if you don't have the Mad Alchemist Ladle yet, I'd be looking for any wand would do, but the best base would be a Dragonhorn wand because it gives you cast speed as well as the highest flat spell damage that you can get on a wand. And then you're just focusing on getting that cast speed, crit multi, shock chance, and lightning pen. As far as the relic, if you don't have a Twisted Heart yet, I would try to get a Scrying Eye once you're high enough level for it to give you extra crit multi, but then you're basically just looking for intelligence, cast speed, and double resistance. Now, the belt, you're going to have a couple options. If you want to run like a rare belt or an exalted belt, I would focus on trying to get an exalted cooldown recovery or hybrid health. Those are the 2 best stats. And then next, you can get lightning damage and get the ward, the cleanse on potion use. That's the big important one. The other option that you would have is a very common set belt that's probably even better than running exalted belt, is the Isadora's Tomb Binding. You should find a bunch of these while leveling. This is going to give you a whole bunch of armor. It's going to give you cast speed, which you normally can't get on a belt, and it's going to give you percentile armor. If this wasn't a set belt and we could get legendary potential on it to add more stats on it, this would probably be the best in slot belt. But sadly, set items cannot get legendary potential, so it's just a good budget alternative until we get like a good legendary potential a Strand of Souls. So those are what I would use in the meantime until you can farm those unique items. And like I said, I'm going to have a timestamp later in the video for you guys that's going to show you how to target farm each of those unique items, where they drop from, and the best order to farm them in to get the most bang for your buck on the character. Now that we've gone over all the unique items and you kind of get an idea for the different interactions that they're going to add to the build, let's go through the rest of the gear kind of piece by piece, what the best base items are to get, and then what stats you want on those items. So we're going to start with the helmet here. So the helmet, the stats that we're looking for is you really want to get as high of intelligence as possible. If you can only get one of these mods as Exalted, which is the purple stat, that's tier 6 or tier 7, you're going to want to make sure it's intelligence. That's going to be the theme across all of these pieces of gear. If it can roll intelligence, we want it Exalted. The second one here is +2 to level of Lightning Blast. That's going to help us get some extra nodes in the Lightning Blast tree so we can really get everything that we want on there. On top of that, it's going to give us increased spell damage. And then the next 2 is going to be percentile health and flat health. So we're stacking that health for the Twisted Heart because the Twisted Heart is sacrificing our life to apply wards, so we want to get as much health as we can. So that's a great spot to get some extra health there. Now you're going to see a sealed affix on here. So you can add a 5th stat to an item by sealing it. And so I'm going to put a T1 mod for a sealed stat, not because I expect you guys to get sealed stats on every item, but I want you to know what the next best mod that you could get on that item would be. So for the helmet, I would probably try to get a reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes. That's just going to help push us over that 100% and pair with our boots. So you can get to like pretty easy to like 90% with just the boots and the passives on our tree. But unless you have like a perfect pair of implicits on the boots, it's not going to quite put you at 100%. So I just try to get a sealed like T1 affix on your helmet. Now the best base type for the helmet is going to be the Arcane Visage because it gives us that cooldown recovery to get us more uptime on our defenses, as well as it gives us a whole bunch of armor. So it gives us 117 armor. If I was going to pick a second base helmet that you would use, you'd probably use the Tyrant's Crown for the extra elemental damage Leech does health. On top of that, it gives you even more armor than the Arcane Visage. The Celestial Helm is pretty decent. That's not too bad. The Weathered Crown is not bad for spell damage. So take whatever helmet you can get while you're leveling, but when you are higher level and you get to choose which base you want to use, Arcane Visage is going to take the cake for the best helmet. The next item is the Amulet. So what we're looking for on an amulet is the highest priority is getting crit multi on there. So you want to try to get crit multi as Exalted, so that T6, T7 modifier if you can. And then the next one's going to be spell damage. Now, spell damage is the same exact thing as lightning damage. They can roll the same exact amount. So they can roll 47 to 70% at tier 5. So whichever one works, just either lightning damage or spell damage. Both of those are pretty good. That's why I put the T1 sealed affix as lightning damage. So if you get a T5 lightning damage, then try to get a sealed spell damage on there, or vice versa. So either one works. We don't really want Lightning Pen on there. Lightning Pen, even at tier 5, only goes to 8 to 9%. And Shock is actually even better. So if you guys didn't know what Shock does, is when you apply a stack of Shock on an enemy, it actually strips away 5% of their lightning res, and that can stack up to 10 times. So Shock is substantially better than Lightning Pen, even at a tier 1. We're attacking so fast that like 28 to 35% chance to Shock is going to hard carry on stripping out the resistance. So you want to get Shock on the amulet. If you do not get Shock on the amulet, you need to be able to slam Shock chance on the Mad Alchemist Ladle. Or you have to wear like a rare wand with Shock on there. Without Shock chance, it is going to drastically lower your single target damage. So really try to prioritize getting Shock chance on there. If you're going to get another damage stat on the amulet, I would try to go for Shred Armor on hit, just to give you a little bit higher percentage. You do get some Armor Shred on the base Mad Alchemist Ladle. Mine rolled really low. I got like a 12% roll or something like that. So just having a little bit of extra on your amulet would go a long way. If you did get like a really good roll on your Mad Alchemist Ladle, you can just grab another resistance on there, and that's going to be totally fine too. It's not necessary to get on there. The only thing that's really necessary is getting that Shock chance on the Bone Amulet. As far as the reason why we're using the Bone Amulet, the resistances that are the hardest for our build to get is Physical, Necrotic, and Void, and Poison res. And this gives us both Physical res and Necrotic res, so that's why it's so much better than any of the other bases. Like, sure, getting like cast speed would be pretty nice, but it's going to be so much better getting the resistance on there and being able to have free affixes on the rest of your gear. So really try to focus on getting a Bone Amulet, but the other ones will work until that happens. Next, we have the chess piece. So for the chess piece, we're looking for intelligence as the main stat. So we're looking for that Exalted roll, T6, T7. And then on the chess piece, you can actually get Lightning Critical Strike Multiplier. So that is a mage exclusive stat that is really, really strong. It does the same thing as regular crit multi does, except you can't get regular crit multi on chess normally. So this is a way that we're able to get a little bit higher critical strike multiplier on there. So really prioritize on that. Other than that, you're looking for the double health rolls again. So percentage health and flat health. So you can't get hybrid health on the chest, so that's what we're looking for here. And then if you were to get another stat, increased armor would be the one to go. You don't really want the flat armor as much. You want to try to get the percentile armor. So that's what I'd look for. And then the best base type by far is the Tyrant Regalia. The reason why is it's going to give us a huge chunk of armor. It's going to give us cast speed. Cast speed is one of our favorite stats. And it's going to give you flat spell damage. So really busted armor that they added in the 1.0 patch. So I would try to focus on getting that. Other than that, the next best would probably be the Celestial Raiment, because it's giving you a critical strike multiplier on there. I mean, if you're struggling on res, I guess you could use a Lunar Raiment or an Archive Robes for the Void res. But I would really try to get a Tyrant once you're at level 77, because that's just going to be a huge spike in damage. All right, next up are rings. So for the rings, what we're looking for is intelligence again, highest priority. If you're going to get Exalted stat, make it intelligence. And then for the second prefix, you want either increased spell damage or lightning damage. Same thing as the amulet. They can roll the same numbers. They both do the same exact thing, just whichever one you get. So spell damage or lightning damage. That's also why I put the lightning damage as the sealed affix here. That would just be your next priority there if you don't get the spell damage. And then as far as the suffixes go, you're just looking for res. So like I was saying earlier, we're getting our Ellie res from our idols mainly. So try to get like physical, void, necrotic, poison res, something like that. We're doing the Opal Ring base because it can give us all attributes, which applies to intelligence. That's 2 extra intelligence, and it gives us cooldown recovery, another top tier stat for us for our defenses. If you're not going to be able to get that, you could get the insignia for the extra cooldown recovery, so it's not going to have the extra intelligence on there. If you're missing resistances, you could do an ivory ring for necrotic, ruby ring for fire res. You could do the gold ring for Ellie res. You don't really need the crit chance, but you could do a copper ring. That would be a good option as well. So just whatever you can get, just try to prioritize getting intelligence on there, guys. If you don't have an intelligence roll on a piece that can get intelligence, you're playing the build wrong. That should be your highest priority, is getting intelligence on every piece that can. So same thing with this ring. It's basically the exact same thing. We just put the res on there, the intelligence, spell damage, whatever. So same exact thing on that ring. For the gloves. So we changed the gloves up a little bit from the previous iteration of the build. We used to be using Crusader gauntlets for void res. We switched it up to the Eternal gauntlets for a couple reasons. The main reason being that implicit of the armor mitigation also applies to damage over time. The more I push into corruption, Mage gets a lot of defenses for hit damage and elemental damage. So you're not taking that much hit damage from sources. The thing that's going to kill you is that damage over time. So being able to apply some of our armor to that is really, really strong. So it's worth having to make up the void res elsewhere to run these gauntlets to get the extra armor and that line right there. Now, we're going to focus on getting the Exalted Intelligence, just like always. We're going to get cast speed and hybrid health. You can get whatever res you need on here, but I just put a little bit of Ellie res to kind of push me over to make sure I'm capped and everything. And then the sealed affix here is what's called an experimental modifier. I'm going to have a timestamp where I go over how to craft the gloves and how to craft the boots, because there's a special way that you can guarantee to get the experimental modifier that you want, and it's a guaranteed sealed stat. So it is very easy to craft 5-statted gloves and boots. So I will show you exactly how to deterministically craft that later on in the video. But that you can get the experimental modifier where you get additional armor mitigation, applies to damage over time, and extra armor. So really, really strong there for you guys. If you aren't going to use the Eternal Gauntlets, the next best option will be Crusader. You could also use the cast speed gloves. Actually, I think they got rid of the cast speed gloves. Okay, yeah, it looks like they got rid of the cast speed gloves. So you can use the ascetic gloves for the cooldown recovery. You could use the crit chance gloves. You don't really need the crit. So those would kind of be your other options. If you need necrotic res, you can use Outcast. But late game, you really want to try to get an Eternal Gauntlets for that damage over time mitigation. All right, so next up, let's go over the boots. So the Citadel boots are really important as far as the base type goes, because this is going to give you up to 50% reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes. If you guys remember in the Runemaster tree, we get some passives that give us 48% reduced bonus damage taken. So if you get a perfect rolled one, that's basically your 100% reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes just off the implicit and that passive. That's free. Your critical strikes defenses is done just with that. So that's why we run the Citadel boots. And then we're looking for that intelligence again. You do want to get movement speed on the boots, cooldown recovery speed, and hybrid health. And then this is an experimental modifier just like the gloves. So the second of Frenzy after you use a traversal skill is not the important stat. We're already constantly getting Frenzy from the Frost Wall. The part that we care about is the 17% increased effect of Frenzy on you. So typically Frenzy gives you the 20% increased cast speed. We're amplifying that by another 17%, even if you're getting it from Frost Wall by using these experimental modifiers. So again, I'll have a timestamp later in the video where I show you how to craft the boots. So that way you can deterministically get this mod on here and then seal it off for a 5-stat boot. All right, so that goes over all of the exalted or rare pieces of gear on there. We went over the unique items. So now I want to go over the idols. So the idols that we're looking for, the hardest ones to get are going to be the large idols. So on the large idols, what we're looking for is increased cast speed while you have lightning aegis. We are always going to have lightning aegis because of the lightning blast node here, lightning attunement, that 5% chance to get lightning aegis on cast. So that should be procced 100% of the time. You can get 19% cast speed on each of these. So we're running 4, so that gives us almost 80% cast speed just with these 4 idols. It's absolutely insane. And then for the other stat, what you'd be looking for is getting the elemental res. That way, you can basically cover your entire elemental resistances just with these idols. So all 4 of these are going to look the same. Get cast speed. Instead of elemental res, you can also get like fire res or lightning res. I think you get cold res too. Oh, not cold res. Okay, so fire or lightning res on there in case you're like missing one of them. You could get a specific one, but elemental res in general would be the best one. And then we're gonna fit in 2 adorned idols. What we're looking for in the adorned idols is ward retention is the important part, and then you can make up your extra resistances here. You can get cold or fire. It goes up to 43%. So if you're missing either of those resistance, get cold or fire there. If you're already covered on your resistances for elemental, on your other one, you can get ward retention and increased lightning damage. You're not going to get the double effect because we're not going to invest in going over 300 mana. It's just not worth the extra stats for a little bit of a percent increase in lightning damage. But if you happen to already have your resistances, that's what you would go for the idols. And then the last part here is the blessings. Now, I mainly am just filling out the blessings actually affect your character. The very first blessing, you can get increased unique item drop rate. That's going to help you farm some of the unique items later on, but that's not mandatory by any means. I wouldn't ever go back to farm this. It's just going to be a waste of time. So the first blessing is going to come from the Black Sun timeline. This is one of the important blessings I talked about earlier on compensating for the Twisted Heart negative health that you're going to be using there. You're constantly consuming 8% of your health every time you cast a spell. So that spell leech is going to be really important to help offset that. Next is going to be coming from the Ending the Storm timeline. So you're going to want the chance to shred lightning resistance on hit. Attacking really fast, we're going to be shredding that resistance really, really quickly for single target. Next up is the Reign of Dragons. You have 2 options here. So you can completely cap your poison resist off this one blessing. So that's what I did on my gear. If you don't take this, you're going to need to get poison res on your gear and make sure you're capped on poison res. It doesn't show capped on here, but that's just because it doesn't give us a maximum roll. So it just averages the 55 and the 75. So if I put like a max roll on there, it would cap you. But yeah, try to get capped on poison res. Poison is what's going to kill you at those high corruptions. Like I was saying earlier, this is really important. If you don't get poison res, the other option is to get 20 to all resistance. So that'll make the rest of your gearing a lot easier. You're just going to get poison res on like your rings or something, just so you're capped on poison res, because that's really important later on. And then for the last 2 timelines, the Age of Winter and the Spirits of Fire, you're looking for the same thing. You're looking for armor. So Age of Winter is going to give you percentile armor, and then the Spirits of Fire is going to give you flat armor. So that's going to help get us up to a pretty respectable armor number. And this is prior to having like the Flame Ward buff that gives us extra armor as well. So we should be able to get to like 50% armor mitigation on here pretty easily with those 2 blessings. So that's going to kind of wrap up the gear. That's what we're looking for in each slot. Later in the video, I'm going to show you how to target farm all the gear using various aspects like Prophecies, Runes of Ascendance, and various different farming techs. So that way you can actually farm out each individual piece of gear missing. But I just want to show you the stats that we're looking for, the stat priorities for each gear, what to slam on your unique items. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys now and what you're trying to really target for. So that should really help with making the character feel a lot smoother if you're getting those pieces of gear. And then again, I can't emphasize enough, every piece of gear that can get intelligence on it, make sure it has intelligence on it. That's your boots, that's your gloves, that's your ring, your chest armor, your helmet. Make sure all of those have intelligence on it. And then, of course, later on, when you're with your unique Twisted Heart, if you can slam intelligence on there, that's great. But that's going to be so far down the line. Just make sure those rare pieces that you have a lot more control over are getting intelligence on there. Otherwise, you're missing so much of your damage. So if you're feeling like your damage isn't enough, that's probably why your intelligence probably sucks. So keep that in mind. But alrighty, that's going to wrap up the gear portion of the video here. Alrighty guys, so now that we've gone through all the various pieces of gear, you know what stats we're looking for, you know how the gear functions, you know the different idols we're going for and the blessings. Now I want to go over how to target farm the different unique items and which order you should be farming your unique items and your blessings in. Now, the first item that I feel like makes the biggest impact for you and is also the easiest one to target farm is going to be the Enigma. So the Fragment Enigma just gives you so much flat damage that you're missing on the build from using the Mad Alchemist Ladle, and it gives you that shotgun effect. This is going to be the biggest impact. Once you drop this item, once you put it into the build, you're really going to feel that damage spike, and it's going to make everything feel so much smoother to play, as well as giving you those satisfying explosions from Spark Charge and that increased area of effect. So how do we target farm Enigma, and why is it easier to target farm than the other unique items? So Enigma is a random drop. It doesn't drop off of a specific boss, which allows us to use all of the different utilities in the game to be able to target farm it. So the first way to be able to do that is by Runes of Ascendance. I'm sure you guys will drop a couple of these as you're going through the game. You should probably will get one or two going through the campaign. Basically, what the Rune of Ascendance does is you can use it on a normal, magic, rare, or exalted item, and it will upgrade that item into a unique item. Now, the limiter on this is you can't use Rune of Ascendance on anything that has a specific drop source. So if it only drops off of a boss or of a particular type of mob, then it cannot be used. You cannot use a Rune of Ascendance to acquire that item. Luckily for us, Enigma is a random drop, so you can get it. So how it works is for the Enigma, we're going to need to use it on a catalyst. It doesn't matter what kind of catalyst it is, as long as it's not already a unique catalyst, it will work and it can change up to an Enigma. There is a little bit of a difference though if you're in the Circle of Fortune faction. So in the Circle of Fortune faction, we have a higher chance of hitting it because if you click Y, it'll pull up your Circle of Fortune page, the level 2 node right here, upgrade Rune of Ascendance. So 45% chance for Runes of Ascendance to be preserved when used on an item that requires at least Circle of Fortune rank 1. So we have a chance not to consume our runes, but the important part is this last line here, Circle of Fortune rank 1. So what that means, if you look at my amulet here that I've got, at the very bottom right corner of the amulet, right next to where it says required level 77, it's got a little purple icon and a rank 5. That means this is a Circle of Fortune item. It needs that purple icon on there to get that 45% chance not to consume it. So you can either look at every single catalyst that drops on the ground, or you can do this trick. If you click Y, you can go to Visit Observatory. It's also right here on the map in the Divine Era. And this is the main hub for the Circle of Fortune. Right next to the waypoint, there's a vendor here. And she, if you look at her wares, will let you gamble for items. So if I go here and gamble for an offhand catalyst, it guarantees that this catalyst is going to have that rank for a Circle of Fortune. It'll never be a rank that you can't equip, but it's going to have that purple icon, meaning you have that chance not to consume your Rune of Ascendance. So what you can do is just gamble a catalyst off her. That way you're not checking every single catalyst on the ground. You're just going to throw it in your crafting window, put a Rune of Ascendance on it, and upgrade it. And then it upgrades to a random unique catalyst. So you can keep doing that a few times and until you get an Enigma. So that's one of the ways that you can target farm the Enigma, even though it's a random drop chance. Wow, we're getting really lucky. All of these are exalted items. But yeah, you just keep throwing these in there, and eventually you'll hit a Enigma off here, off a Rune Ascendance. Sometimes, it takes 10 tries, sometimes you get it in the first try. So it really just depends on your luck, but eventually you'll get one that has the Enigma. Now, the much stronger way to try to get an Enigma is Prophecies. Prophecies work the same way that the Runes of Ascendance do, where you can't use them on anything that has a specific drop source. So this will only work for the Enigma unique, for all the uniques in our build. All the other ones come off of a particular boss or particular mob. The first thing you're going to want to do with your Prophecies is you're going to want to make sure you buy the correct lenses. Now, this is going to the success on this is going to determine based on your level on the Circle of Fortune. So you can't buy all of the lenses from the vendor unless you're like a certain rank. But the first one you're going to want to buy is a regional lens. It only requires rank 2, and it's the one that gives you the increased chance to find catalysts as the prophecy reward. So pick that one up if you're a low level. If you are a higher level and you have the extra slots for your lenses, what you can grab is these two right here, the refracting lens of rhyme. So it's going to increase the cost of your prophecies, but all of your prophecies can now offer twice as many uses before expiring. So if you had a prophecy that said, kill the Shade of Oribus and he'll drop 10 unique catalysts, and you could do that 2 times, Now it's going to be 4 times instead of 2 times. So you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck, even though it's giving you 80% cost. The next one is the Refracting Lens of Wealth. So it's going to add another cost modifier on there, but all of your prophecies will now offer double the rewards. So again, if you have 10 unique drops that are going to be coming off of a Shade of Orbis, now it's going to be 20 unique drops. And you're going to have the 4 chances instead of the 2 from the other lens. So you're getting like 40 offhands. Likes are that one of those is going to be an Enigma. So let me show you how to actually roll these quests real quick. So you're going to go over here. You're going to go over to any one of these little telescopes and you're going to click on them. Now for the Enigma, you're going to go to the East section. This is going to be where you have like weapons and offhands. So you're going to slot in your lenses here. So I've already got them pre-slotted in. And then we're going to be looking for quest rewards of activities you're already going to be doing. Don't go out of your way to go to different areas just to complete a prophecy, like going to the arena or going to other dungeons you don't want to do. Try to find stuff that's already in the monolith that you're farming. And then I would also recommend having both of these checked. It's going to make it easier to find your quest reward, and then you don't have to do the confirmation message as well. So see this little book here? This right here is a unique catalyst reward. So the current timeline I'm farming is Reign of Dragons. And so this is the Reign of Dragons timeline. Death of Emperor of Corpses, which is the main boss of the timeline, drops 6 unique catalysts. And then if you see right at the top there, it says fulfilled 0 out of 2 times. So that means I can kill him twice and get 6 catalysts each time. So that's 12 catalysts right there. So I'm going to pick that reward up. And then it's going to randomly re-roll them. Don't be afraid to click this re-roll a whole bunch of times until you get stuff that's what you're already doing. It's going to save you so much time, I promise. And then on top of that, anytime you spend favor points, it's increasing your rank. So even if you're re-rolling a whole bunch, it's not wasted points. It's still going to be leveling you up. So you're just going to keep re-rolling until you find another little orange book that means it's a unique catalyst. So we've got right here, Lightless Arbor Dungeon is the condition. I don't want to do Lightless Arbor Dungeon. That sounds like a waste of time. So I'm just going to keep re-rolling. Okay, we got another one here. Death of Shade of Orbis. That's another amazing one to take. You can kill Shade of Orbis in any single timeline. So this is really universal no matter where you're farming. So that's a great option for it. So the quests that you're going to be looking for are the boss of the specific timeline you're looking for. You can get one that has a generic boss kill. It just says kill a boss. Doesn't matter where it's at. Shade of Orbis is really strong. Exiled Mages. Exiled Mages can spawn in every single timeline, so that's a really good one. Finding one that has like a rare monster name on there, because the rare monsters can spawn in any timeline. So if it has like Diamond Matron or Ogre, you can get those in any of your timelines. So those are really strong. So this one's Arena Tier 4. I don't want to do the Arena. Arena's a waste of time, so we're just going to keep re-rolling. Age of Winter timeline. I'm not farming the Age of Winter right now, so I'm not doing that one. Arena number 2. Still going to skip those. So just try to make sure it's stuff you're already doing. Don't waste your time trying to chase prophecies. Make the prophecies come to you, and it'll be so much more beneficial. So this one's the Soul Bastion one. I'm not really going to do that. Temporal Sanctum dungeons aren't too bad because you're going to go to the Temporal Sanctum a lot to upgrade legendary items anyways. This one doesn't have a specific tier for the Sanctum dungeon as well. It just says kill rare enemies and you'll get 8 catalysts. So that's a pretty good one. So basically you're just going to grab a whole bunch of those. You're going to fill up your prophecy page with that. So you could have like 10 different prophecies that are all for killing the Shade of Orbis that drops like 8 uniques. So when you kill Shade of Orbis, he's going to drop like 60 different unique offhand catalysts. When I did this, I was able to get 2 legendary potential Enigmas within the first 30 minutes of my stream. So this is by far the best way to target farm the Enigma. And then you can also apply the same rule to every single Exalted item in here. So you're going to set up the same exact 2 lenses in every single area. You're just going to change up this third one based on what you're target farming. So for instance, the south one here gives you jewelry. So I'm going to be looking for purple jewelry. And then I have my other lens set up here for, that will show you guys. So increased chance per rank to find exalted items. So that's good because I'm only going to want exalted jewelry from here since I'm not using any unique jewelry. So right here, Death of Siege Golem. That's just a rare monster I can find. Gives me 7 exalted amulets. That's perfect if I'm trying to farm exalted amulets. Over here, Death of a Boss. No condition. Exalted jewelry. So this is a good way that you can farm any of your exalted items you're looking for or the Enigma. Now, when it comes to these other unique items, and the next item on the list I would try to target farm, it would be your Twisted Heart. I don't know why it's not showing the hovers. There we go. Twisted Heart. Twisted Heart is going to carry your defense. Enigma carries offense. Twisted Heart carries all of your defense. That 8% of current health gained as ward every time you cast an elemental spell is massive. This is what's going to let you push past 300 corruption and just be infinitely tanky with the 16k ward health pools by getting this item. So the Twisted Heart is a boss only drop. So those other methods aren't going to work on target farming him. So in order to farm him, you need to go to the end of the time and you need to farm the Reign of Dragons. He drops off the final boss from the Reign of Dragons. So you're just going to have to kill that boss over and over. Now, for all of the rest of these target farms, what I would recommend doing is unlocking empowered monoliths first. You do that by hugging the right side here, getting to the very end, killing the 390 monoliths, and then clicking on the little shiny rock in the middle here, and that will activate empowered monoliths. That's going to drastically increase your drop rates off these bosses. So don't sit in a single timeline farming a blessing or farming a boss drop until you unlocked empowered monoliths. You're just wasting your time. On top of that, the blessings that drop are twice as good if you farm them in empowered monoliths versus the regular ones. So make sure you're prioritizing that first. Then the first thing you should go farm is Reign of Dragons. Try to get your either Poison Res Blessing or your All Res Blessing while you're doing it. And then do that until you drop a Twisted Heart. Once you've dropped a Twisted Heart, like we had talked about earlier, you're going to need to compensate for that health that it's costing you. So the next farm I recommend doing is a Blessing farm, and it's going to be in the Black Sun. You want to go and farm the spell damage leases health. So that's going to be the third farm you do. So you farm Enigma, you go farm your Twisted Heart in the Reign of Dragons, then you go to the Black Sun and you farm the Spell Leech Blessing. After the Spell Leech Blessing, you can farm the Strand of Souls. The Strand of Souls is a unique belt that drops off of the Fall of the Outcast timeline. So you're going to farm that boss until it drops. Now, as far as the Mad Alchemist Ladle goes, he's a little bit different. He's not a targeted boss per se, but he's a targeted type of monster. So he drops only off of exiled mages. Exiled mages are good though because they can drop at any single monolith. They can also even drop during the campaign. As long as it's a level 17 area, you have a chance to spawn an exiled mage in the area you're in. Now the exiled mages, let me pull up a picture so you know what they look like. Let's see here. That way you guys can actually see the picture of them. Okay, so let's switch this over. Okay, this is what the exiled mages look like, guys. So they're in these rune prisons. They're going to show up on the mini map with a little icon. You're going to walk over to it. You're going to click it. It's going to spawn a mage. You kill him. He has 3 different uniques he can drop. One of them is the Ladle. Now, the Ladle is a little bit harder to farm. That one's going to be what takes you probably the longest to get. Because it's a little bit bugged right now. So it doesn't seem like corruption is affecting the drop rates of the Ladle. So you are just as likely to find a Ladle through the campaign as you are at 1,000 corruption. So it's going to be a little bit RNG. Some people are going to get it in 5 exiled mage kills. Some people it's going to take 100. The good thing is though, you are farming the Ladle when you're doing any content in the game. So you'll eventually find one. So I don't really want to put that in a certain order on when to farm it. You're just going to get it when you get it. So in the meantime, I showed you the replacements for the unique items. If you don't already have them, just use a Exalted wand or a rare wand. It'll be just fine until you drop the Ladle. But yeah, the belts, yeah, just try to get the ward retention belt when you can. And then once you've got all the different uniques farmed, we can focus on doing your blessings. So you should already have the Spell Leech blessing. The next highest tier blessing I would recommend doing is the Lightning Shred blessing. This is only going to come from the Ending Storm timeline. So you're going to farm this timeline until the boss at the end gives you the option for the chance to shred lightning resistance. This will help your single target drastically. Now, the next blessing I would recommend farming would be the Age of Winter. It's going to give you a percentile armor blessing on there that's really strong. So, and then after you farm that one from the Age of Winter, you're going to bounce over to the Spirits of Fire and you're going to farm the flat armor blessing. So that will be really strong as well. You're going to boost up your physical damage reduction, as well as that applies to a percentage of your other elemental types. So 70% of that is going to apply to non-physical damage as well. So that is the order I would farm the different uniques in, the different blessings. Hopefully that helps you guys out with it. There isn't too much more that you can do to target farm on the unique items. Technically, you can get a blessing from the Fall of the Outcast that increases the drop rate of unique items. That will help a little bit. But if you don't get it the first time that you do this timeline, I wouldn't waste your time trying to farm that blessing. Because, if that ends up taking you like 10 different kills just to farm a blessing to give you like 15% chance to increase your unique drops, it's not even the particular unique drop that you want. It's just going to be more of a waste of time trying to farm that than just going in and farming the boss for those particular unique items. So keep that in mind, guys. But yeah, hopefully that helps you acquire all of the different items you're looking for. The other target that you can do is for your idols. So if you're trying to find a particular idol, you can do the same prophecy tech that we use on the Enigma. It's just going to be on the west side here. And then I have a large idol increased drop chance with the other 2 purple ones. You're going to do the same thing that you did before, just looking for stuff that gets you idols or large idols or adorned idols, just stuff you're already doing. So that's how you target farm in this game. The prophecies should help a bunch. If you are in the trade faction, you don't get these supercharged target farming things, but you can just do whatever you want, farm gold, and just buy the item. So a lot less fun that way, but it's easier. You don't have to go through all these extra steps. You just aren't going to get as many massive amounts of drops at once from doing it that way. So that's how you do all the target farming, guys. Alright guys, so the next step here is I want to teach you how to craft your gloves and your boots for this build. How to add experimental modifiers deterministically. That way you can have 5 statted gloves and 5 statted boots. So I don't have any on the correct bases right now. I've already used them all trying to craft for the build. But I want to show you just examples on how to hit the right experimental modifier. So we're just going to pretend like this melee attack speed is a tier 6 mod, and then we'll go from there and how to craft it. This is the website that I use to do this. So this is on tunklab/insight. And that's how we're going to calculate everything out here for you guys. So I'm gonna be showing that throughout the guide here, just so you can see what I'm doing and how to fill it out. Now, the first thing you guys need to know is how to get a Glyph of Insight. So you get Glyph of Insights by finding items that have experimental modifiers on it. So we'll say experimental, and then using a Rune of Research. Rune of Research is you get from killing the exiled mages. It should drop almost every time. You should have a whole bunch of them. I've got 162 of them. So every time you see an experimental modifier drop on the ground, pick it up. Even if it's a bad one, just use a Rune of Research. And if it procs, it's just going to drop a Glyph of Insight at your feet. So try to be farming those. That way you're ready to craft when the time comes. Now, the first step with doing the craft is you have to use the Glyph of Insight on a prefix, which means you can't have, you have to have one prefix that's at least tier 4 or lower. It can't be tier 5 because you have to have the ability to upgrade the tier. So the first step here is we're going to add a prefix. It doesn't actually matter what the affix is because it's going to get changed to that experimental modifier anyways. So I'm just going to add, I don't know, I'll add attunement because I have a whole bunch of attunement charts. So we're going to add an attunement on here. So now we have a tier 1 attunement on there. This is ready to start crafting. So how the gloves work is on our website here, we have the ability to fill out a bunch of prefixes. And then it basically takes the tiers of all of these stats and it adds them together to get a sum number. And then that sum number determines what the experimental modifier is. So let's fill it out for these. So we have a tier 6 prefix. We have a tier 1 prefix. We have a tier 3 prefix, or sorry, suffix. And then we have a tier 1 suffix, right? So you see how that changed? So the sum of all of these affixes together gives us ward gained on kill. That's not the stat we're looking for, so we need to upgrade something. I would recommend not upgrading your prefix, so that's going to get changed no matter what, and the tier that this particular affix is doesn't matter on what the tier is going to turn into. So I would just try to craft your gloves just like you normally would, trying to hit the stats that you're looking for. So let's see what happens. Health and armor shred aren't bad stats to have on the gloves. So let's see what happens if I upgrade this tier 1 armor shred to tier 2. So if I were to upgrade that, it would give us a dodge rating affix instead. So that's not really what I'm looking for. So let's go ahead again and see what happens if we hit a tier 3. So if we hit tier 3, that's going to go up to percentage of current health loss per second. Still not the mod we're looking for. So I'm going to go one more time. What happens if we hit it to a tier 4? So tier 4, that's going to give us armor mitigation. That's the mod we're looking for. So that's what we're going to go and try to do. Now, it doesn't matter if it's this particular suffix again, just matters what the total tiers all added together equals. So if I hit a critical success on one of these other modifiers, then I won't have to pull this all the way up to a tier 4, but we're just going to calculate it out as we're crafting, just depending on what RNG gives us. So I've got a Glyph of Hope on here. That way we have a 25% chance not to use our forging potential. So let's go ahead and upgrade this and see what happens. Okay, we didn't hit a critical success, so right now we need to get this to tier 4 unless something else gets upgraded. So let's go again. Okay, so I hit a critical success on the health, so that went to a tier 4. So now I don't need to get that to a tier, the armor shred to a tier 4. So let's fill this out again. So tier 6 is good, tier 1 is good on the prefixes, my health turned into a tier 4, and then my armor shred is a tier 3. So with that combination of them all added together, you can see it's going to give me the stat I'm looking for. So now that I've got that all added together correctly, and I know what stat it's going to give me, I'm going to switch my Glyph of Hope over to a Glyph of Insight. Then you're going to upgrade it at the prefix. This only works on the prefix, guys, so you have to have a prefix you can upgrade. So I'm going to hit that. Boom. Experimental armor applies to damage over time. So I knew that it was going to hit that for me based on all of the tiers added together and what the site was telling me. So now that I've got the experimental modifier on there, I want to seal this experimental modifier. That way I can add a prefix that I actually want. So how you'll do that is you'll put this back over to Glyph of Hope, so we have a chance not to use our forging potential. And you're going to go to your glyphs, and you're going to grab a Rune of Research. So the cool part about using a Rune of Research versus using like a Glyph of Despair, which is how you'd normally seal modifiers off, is the Glyph of Research guarantees that it hits the seal if it's an experimental modifier. So we're going to hit this. Guaranteed hit that seal. So now this modifier is over here, so you can still see it on the pair of gloves, but we have an extra slot now. So let's clear off this rune, and let's just add another stat we want. So this is a melee pair of gloves because we have melee attack speed. It'd be better if it was int for our build. But let's maybe just do like I don't know, crit strike chance. That sounds pretty good for a melee build. So let's just add crit strike chance on there. Awesome. Now we have a 5-stat pair of gloves. That's looking pretty sick. We have health on there, armor shred. We have the armor mitigation applies to damage over time. And we got crit chance on there. And now you can just craft your gloves just like normal. So you can just start upgrading stuff, getting these to tier 5s. All right, so look, now we have a pair of gloves that has 3 tier 5 modifiers on there, a T6 modifier on there, and a sealed experimental affix. So this is basically how you would craft the gloves like I'm wearing right now with the T7 int and a bunch of other tiers on there with the armor mitigation applies damage over time. So that's how you're going to craft the gloves to get those 5 modifiers on there. Now, next, let's look at the boots, because the boots work a little bit different than the gloves. So on the website here, you're going to select the boots section. So the boots don't actually matter what the affixes are. It doesn't add up the total of the affixes. None of that matters. So you actually don't even need to fill this part out. The only part that matters is the actual forging potential that's on the item. So it's a little bit more RNG on the boots. So I have 48 forging potential on my boots. So I'm going to put 48. So you can see it just told me it's going to give me seconds of haste after you use a traversal skill. Increase the haste effect is probably the second best option I can get, but I'm going to try to shoot for the frenzy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start crafting these boots just like I normally would. And then each time I lose forging potential, I'm just going to double check it and see if it hits the mod I want on there. So I'm going to ignore the prefixes for now. Obviously strength isn't what I want, but that's going to change to an experimental modifier anyways. So the first thing I'm going to do is dodge rating obviously isn't good either, but I'm going to add an affix I do want on here. So we're going to go over to suffixes, we're going to go over, and I'm going to add cooldown recovery speed, because that's pretty good for the build. So, boom, that turns to 37. So now I am going to go ahead and pull this back up, and I'm going to turn this to 37 and see what it says. All right, so look at that. That gives us the frenzy, increased effect of frenzy. That's the stat that we want for the build. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to my Glyph of Insight. And then I'm going to upgrade the strength because I know it's going to give me frenzy now. Awesome. Experimental frenzy effect, tier 3. So now we have the affix we want in here. So we're going to click the Glyph of Hope again, and we're going to go over to Rune of Research, just like we did on gloves. We're going to seal that away. That's sealed off. That's funny. It actually gave us a Glyph of Insights. So yeah, guys, that's how you get the Glyph of Insights, is by sealing experimental modifiers. So we'll pick that up. So that's good that it showed it there. And then now I'm going to add the actual fix I do want on here, which was move speed, right, for the build. So ooh, that took a huge chunk of forging potential. But now I have move speed. So now I have a 5-statted pair of boots. And obviously the dodge rating wasn't what I wanted. So I'm going to Glyph of Chaos it to see if I hit something good. It's probably going to take out my forging potential, but it's whatever. All right, we hit lightning res. Let's say that's what we want. We'll switch back to a Glyph of Hope, and then we'll just start upgrading the tiers. But that's how you're going to get the 5-statted pair of of gloves and boots. We're not trying to farm glutes here. Using the website. So the website will be in the video description for you guys. I hope that helps with kind of showing you some crafting examples live and kind of how to target the different affixes that you're looking for and really getting those experimental modifiers that are really powerful. So hopefully that helps you guys with the crafting example. The next thing I wanted to go over for you guys is how to use the loot filter for this build. So if you guys look at any of my build guides or look at this guide here in the video description, there's going to be a loot filter link that says a Pastebin website. So what you're going to do when you grab that, I believe there's a command for it. I just can't remember what it is, but you're basically going to pull up the Pastebin. It's going to have a whole bunch of text here that looks confusing. You're basically just going to highlight from line 1 all the way to the end here of this Pastebin. So once you have all the Pastebin, you're just going to click Control C, or if you right click it, you can click copy. So that's going to copy all of that text here for you. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go in game, you're going to click Shift F. That's going to pull open your loot filter screen. Once you do that, you're going to click the little plus sign here and do not click create new filter, but click paste clipboard contents. That's going to paste in all of the loot filter options there, and then you can just name it whatever you want. So you could put, Mad Lightning Runemaster. I'm just going to put example, but you could put, whatever you want on there. You can change the colors around as much as you want, change it to whatever icon you want. And then I have a little description here. As you get higher level, I'd recommend deleting res affixes and rare items. As you upgrade to exalted items, you can also delete rules when you get uniques. So I try to put a lot of instructions here on how to use the filter. So let's click confirm. So that's all added in here now. Here is the loot filter. So what's going to happen when you're using the loot filter is I have it set up so it progresses with you as you level. I would recommend turning this on at around like level 15. That way you can pick up a couple of junk items that are on the ground, have some gear equipped on your character and whatnot. But if you look at it here, it's going to level up with you. So the first rule is it's going to start showing some wands. So this is a low level wand. It's only going to show this rule from level 1 to 20. Then it's just not going to show those types of wands anymore. Next, it's going to start showing birch wands at level 20. Birch wands are a better upgraded version of the wands. So that's going to show you from level 20 to 31, because that's when those wands start falling off and they're not as strong for you. And then it's going to upgrade again to ivory wands. Ivory wands are really good. They give you flat damage. They give you decent chunk. That's going to hold you over from level 31 to 47. So I have it set up like that for every type of item. That way you're constantly getting rid of the low level base items you don't care about anymore to the new base items that are now relevant for your level. So this filter is going to level with your character. So you shouldn't have to really delete a whole lot on there yet. You should only be seeing good items that have like 2 affixes that are decent on there, like lightning damage or spell damage or something that's relevant to your character. Now, how you use the loot filter here is the stuff that's going to be potentially an upgrade for you is going to drop as a normal rare item. It's just going to show as like a yellow text. It's going to be like what you would normally see even without a loot filter. So if you're seeing stuff like that, that means that might potentially be an upgrade that you can craft on or just equip on your character. So the next step here is what to use your runes of shatter on and your runes of removal to get affixes to crafting. So I put some instructions on here. So if you see an item that shows up looking like this, like a red icon with an underline that's in bold, this is a rare modifier. So it says use rune of removal to pull these mods off if you're not gonna wear it. Or if you see a white undercolored item, that means it's a common mod that's at least a tier 5 modifier. Use a rune of shattering to acquire these mods if you're not going to wear it. So let's show you some examples of that. So I've got 2 examples here. So this is a common modifier. It's got a T5 cast speed roll on there. So if I drop this on the ground, it's showing up as white. So I see white here. I look at the loot filter, recolor. Oh, that means it's got that T5 cast speed on there. It's common. I should use a rune of shattering to see what I acquire. So what happens when you use a rune of shattering is it is going to roll the dice and it is going to give you random affix shards based on what is on here. And then the higher the tier, the more likely it is to give you more. It's not guaranteed though. So I might get some cast speed. Let's shatter and see. Okay, so I didn't even get the cast speed on there, so it's kind of a gamble, but that's what you're going to use on the white ones because they're not super rare mods. I don't really care if I don't get them, but it'd be nice if I do. So it's only going to show those if they're at a T5 or higher, though. That way it's more likely to give you more shards. Now, the next rule in that loot filter, the rare mods. So I've got Hybrid Life on this pair of gloves right here. So if I drop this on the ground, it's going to show up as red. So that matches with the color I'm seeing there. So I know this has a rare modifier on it. It's got Hybrid Health. You don't see those as often. So instead of using a rune of Shattering on here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a rune of Removal. So what a rune of Removal does is it randomly pulls off one modifier off the item. Whatever mod it pulls off the item, it guarantees you that it's going to give you that shard. And then the higher tier it is, it will guarantee give you that many shards. So if I use the rune of Removal right here to pull off this Hybrid Life, I got 2 hybrid health shards because it was a tier 2. So if that was a tier 5 hybrid health, it would give me 5 shards. So you want to use these on the rare modifiers, so that way you're making sure that you're getting those affixes, because you're not going to see them as often. You don't want to take that gamble chance like the rune of removal. So that's how the functionality works for the stuff that you're going to be crushing or using rune of removals off of the filter. Everything else is just going to show up as a rare item for you. I have it currently set up to show all unique set and exalted items, so anything that's got a tier 6 or higher modifier is going to guaranteed show up on the filter. So this one shows up as pink instead of purple because it has a tier 7 modifier. That's a good mod. So normal exalted items are just going to show up as purple. Let me see, like this one right here. Oh, that's got an experimental modifier on it. That's why it's showing up that way. Sorry. But yeah, if it was just a normal exalted modifier, it'd just show up as purple. But if it's a modifier we care about that's exalted as like a T6 modifier, it's going to show up as like a yellow color. So see that yellow color? That's because it has exalted intelligence on it. Intelligence is one of the best stats for our build. So I want to make sure I know that, and I'm not just thinking it's a normal exalted item. Or if it's a tier 7 modifier that's rare, like intelligence, it's going to show up as pink. That way I know that's a really good item. I need to go out of my way to pick that up. As you start gearing the character and as you start getting some of the uniques, the loot filter is going to give you specific instructions on what to do. So once I find the Twisted Heart unique item for our relic, I don't need to be picking up relics anymore off the ground. Nothing I find off that's a relic that's rare is going to ever replace a Twisted Heart. So if you look at it right here where it says show endgame relic, it says delete relic rules after getting Twisted Heart. So it's telling me exactly what to do. So anything that says relic on it, I know I can delete. So both of these are relics, so I'm just going to delete it off the filter. This is endgame ring, so I don't need to delete that. And then this one's also a relic, so I'm going to delete it. I have my unique item. Same thing's going to apply for belts. So I have a unique belt that I use for this build. So if I go down to where it shows belt rules, you can see show endgame belt, delete belt rules after getting Strand of Souls or the Isidora's Tomb Binding. I have a Strand of Souls, so let me go ahead and delete everything that says belt on it. All right, that's good. Same thing with the ladle for wands. So if I go down to where it shows all the wand things, so show endgame wands, delete all wands after you get a Mad Alchemist ladle. I have Mad Alchemist ladle. Cool. Let me delete everything that says wand on it. So boom, ivory wand, birch wand, 2 subtypes of wand. Okay, now I have no wand rules left. So you're slowly pulling everything off your filter that you don't want to see anymore because nothing's ever going to replace those uniques for you that are set for the build. Same thing with Enigma. So delete all catalyst rules after getting Fragment of Enigma. So awesome. That's a catalyst. The Osprey Skull's a catalyst. That's a catalyst. That's a catalyst. And that's a catalyst. Okay, now I have no catalyst rules left on there. So we're slowly pulling down our loot filter and pulling stuff off that's going to be showing up on there because I'm getting the unique items that I need. And then the same thing's going to apply once you start getting exalted items. This T7 exalted item with intelligence on it, it's the right base and everything. I'm never going to need a rare chess piece again. No rare chess piece is going to be good enough to replace this current chess piece. So that way I know I can just go in here. Endgame body armor, I'm just going to delete that. Body armor, this is a body armor. If you click on it too, it'll tell you. So like type body armor, just in case you're wondering if you don't know what the different base types are called. So I'm going to delete that because nothing's ever going to replace that. And you can do that with all of these. These are all for rare items. So once you're fully exalted items, you can literally just go in here and delete every single rare affix off of here because you're not going to need any of these. So yeah, you just delete everything off there. It's good. So now you're just left with like idols and exalted items on there, and now you have a much stricter loot filter. So you can kind of evolve this yourself, guys, as you start getting stuff. And I try to give as many instructions on there to show you how to modify your own loot filter. I know it's scary. I know PoE is this big thing. You have to go to an external website and create all this stuff. You don't have to do that with Last Epoch. It's super efficient. It's in the game. You're free to toy around with it and mess around with it as much as you want. It's super easy to do that, and they try to encourage that. And I try to encourage that with my loot filter as well. If you guys don't feel comfortable with doing that though, and you just want to use my loot filter exactly how it is, it's going to pull off those lower level bases for you anyways. And then once you're fully exalted gear, I'm going to actually have a super strict loot filter posted in the video description for you as well that you can just download. So like here's an example of my super endgame loot filter. It has almost no rules on here. This is only to show exalted items that are a good mod. I don't even show all exalted items anymore. I show unique items, I show idols, that's it. I don't even show the common mods with tier 5 anymore. It only shows the rare mods for me, so I just either Rune of Shatter or Rune of Removal those. That way I'm seeing hardly anything on the ground, especially if you're playing like Circle of Fortune. You're going to be getting so many drops on the ground, you don't want to see all that crap. So that's a general tutorial on how to use my loot filter. I hope that makes a little bit more sense if some of you guys were uneasy about how the loot filters work. I know it doesn't show you how to create it at least. It would be way too long a video if I added that as well, but at least gives you a basic tutorial on how to use my loot filter. All right, guys, one of the last things we're going to be going over here is how to play the build and how to set up different keybinds to maybe make that process a little bit easier for you. And then at the very end, I'll do a quick fact section for you guys, just some really common questions I've been getting, just to kind of recap those in case you guys are wondering about those. So the number one question that I get is how I autocast some of my abilities. So with this new setup, it's a little bit more button intensive than the old Runebolt version I was doing before. So you kind of have to click your Runic Invocation whenever you have the 3 runes above your head to get your shield. It doesn't do the teleport for you anymore. On top of that, you're casting Flame Ward on cooldown, you're dropping your Frost Wall, you're zipping through it with your movement skill, you're shooting Lightning Blast. It's a little bit more button intensive. So people who have watched my stream notice that I'm auto-casting a lot of those abilities, and I want to show you guys how to do that without breaking a terms of service. I don't use a macro, I don't use anything like that that would be against the terms of service of the game. I use a very old trick that works on almost every action RPG. It's the numlock trick. Now keep in mind, guys, this only works if you're playing on keyboard, so it doesn't work if you're playing on a controller, and you have to have a number pad on your keyboard for this to function. So what you're going to do is you're going to click Escape, you're going to go to your settings, and you're going to go to Gameplay, and at the very top of Gameplay, you're going to click Change Input Keys. This is going to be what allows you to change your keybinds. So the 2 abilities I'm auto-casting are my Flame Ward and my Runic Invocation, because I want them to cast every single time they're up. So what you're going to need to do is I have Flame Ward as my usability 1, and I have Runic Invocation as my usability 5. So I'm going to set up a secondary keybind for my Flame Ward that's going to be the number 1 button on my numpad. And then I'm going to set up the Runic Invocation as the number 5 button on my numpad. So they both have to be keybound to a number on your numpad. Once that's been done, you're going to go in game, and I'm going to hold down the number 1 button on my numpad. As you can see with the skill at the bottom of the bar, it's now showed up as gray, because that's because I'm currently holding it down. Now, while I'm holding down that number 1 button on my numpad, I'm also going to hold down the number 5 button on my numpad. Now you can see Runic Invocation is also grayed out. Now I'm still holding both of those numbers down. While I'm holding them both down, I'm going to tap the numlock button on my numpad, and then I'm going to let go after I've tapped numlock. And you're going to see it's going to keep automatically cycling through and clicking those. So that's now 2 buttons out of the way that I have to press. Now the only buttons I'm pressing is my Frost Wall and my movement skill, and then I'm just zapping shit. That's it. That's all I do. So you do want to try to make sure you have your 3 runes above your head before this goes off. So you'll just have to keep an eye on that. Otherwise, it won't give you the correct Runic Invocation. So I'm just moving around, clicking Frost Wall, using my movement skill, making sure I have those 3 runes above my head, and then it's just casting everything else for me, guys. So that's the general damage rotation. You know, dropping Frost Wall on top of the targets, making sure it's applying those brands, and I'm just zapping stuff. So it's super, super easy to play with this setup. I hope that makes it a little bit smoother for you guys, takes away some of those buttons so you guys don't feel overwhelmed. And that's how you set up the numlock trick there that you guys just seen in my live stream. The one other thing, guys, I did want to mention about doing the numlock setting, I almost forgot, so I went and edited this in later, is if you do tab out, so if you tab out to another monitor, you tab out of the game, it is going to take off that numlock. So I did that right now. So I still have my numlock on, but it's still not pressing my abilities for me. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to uncheck off numlock. And then you're going to need to re-hold down those keybinds and then just tap numlock again. That's it. So just holding down that 1 and 5, hit the numlock again, puts it back on. So if I tab out, you're going to see, so I just tabbed out right there. It's going to be gray, but it's not actually casting anything. And then when I tap back in, they're going to stop turning gray and they're not going to be casting. So turn back off numlock, 1 and 5, hit numlock again. That should fix it for you guys. So hopefully that helps you guys out. Guys, we're getting towards the end of the video. The very last thing I wanted to do is I wanted to go over a couple of FAQ, different questions I'm constantly getting on my stream, and just to tackle those in case you run into one of these problems. So two of the questions I get a little bit that both had the same answer is, why is my DPS not as high as yours? And why am I not being able to get as high a ward as you're able to get? You know, I'm only getting 2,000 to 3,000 ward, and I see you getting like 16,000, 17,000. What's the difference? So the short answer is intelligence. Intelligence is king. Intelligence is everything. I've been saying it the whole build video. You need more intelligence. So if you look at my character right now, I have 142 intelligence. Intelligence is going to give you not only damage, but it also gives you ward retention. So your ward isn't decaying as fast. So that's going to allow you to build it up a lot faster. On top of that, your intelligence is giving you cast speed. So you're casting more often, which means you're proccing Twisted Heart more often, getting that 8% of your current health gained as ward every time you cast a spell. It's also going to be proccing your Unsealed Mana node that's going to give you a burst of ward. You're going to be getting the Arcane Focus that's going to give you ward gained on direct spell cast because you have more cast speed, because you have more intellect. You're also going to be getting the Jagged Veil, the ward on crit, because I'm casting more often. So it's just a fine combination of gear, just having a lot of intelligence, a lot of cast speed. That's what's going to be giving you your damage and your ward. So if you're not getting up to those high ward numbers that you want to be, that's probably why, guys, you need to be stacking intelligence and ward. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. So try to get that sorted out, and that should help you guys out to getting to those like much higher ward numbers that you're looking for, and the much higher damage numbers that you're looking for as well. So hopefully that helps out with that. The other question that I get a lot is I can't get my runes to be cold fire cold. Something's happening. I'm getting lightning runes in there. It's not always putting in the same order, or I'm stuck at 2 runes. So there's a couple things that are going to fix that. Number one, you need to go through Runic Invocation, make sure you follow the build planner, and you have immutable order taken. That's what's going to change it from being whatever element you're casting to the first 3 skills on your bar. The next thing you need to check is the first 3 skills on your bar. Do you have Flame Ward, Frostwall, Flame Rush? If you do, and it's still not giving you Cold Fire Cold, did you follow the build planner with Flame Ward and turn it into a cold skill? Flame Ward's a cold skill, not a fire skill once you take Frost Ward. Same thing with this one, Frostwall. If you're taking Pyroglass, it's now a fire skill instead of a cold skill. And then same thing with Flame Rush. If you're taking the node over here for snowballing, it's now a cold skill instead of a fire skill. So make sure you guys are following the planner exactly. That way you have the right element for each of these skills so you can follow that setup. These have to be in this order. The only thing you can change is have Flame Ward over here and Flame Rush over here, because it's still cold, fire, cold. But other than that, set it up exactly how I have it. Make sure you have the talents on there. The other thing I see people saying is I can only gain 2 wards instead of 3. It's because you mistakenly put in a unique relic into the build. The unique relics are really bad, guys. These only apply to damage runic invocations. It doesn't give us extra damage. It literally does 0 things for us except hamper the build. Don't use them. No unique relics, period. Okay, so if you watch, now I'm at 2 runes. I can't get above 2 runes no matter how much I'm casting, because that's how this unique relic works. Once you have 2 runes for Runic Invocation, your runes cannot change until they are consumed. So even when you consume it, it only lets you go back up to 2. So keep that in mind. Those are the two big things with the Runic Invocations that I see a lot of people running into it, and then people wondering why I'm not using these new unique relics. They're really bad for the build. They only work if your Runic Invocation is actually a damage skill. So hopefully that helps out, guys. Hopefully that answers a lot of the common facts. Guys, if you did appreciate the video, I put in so much work. It's the day before my birthday. I've spent almost 12 hours just planning everything, recording it. I haven't even started editing at this point when I'm doing this outro. So I'm probably gonna spend another 2-3 hours editing everything, putting it together, checking sound levels and audio and everything, and uploading it to YouTube, putting in all the YouTube information. That's gonna take a few more hours. So I'm probably gonna have spent like 14-15 hours on the video, guys. So if you did appreciate the stuff, if this helps you answer a lot of your questions, if it gives you a good resource to be able to play this build at the fullest level, do me a favor, leave a like on the video. Think about subbing to the channel. It's gonna help me a lot. I'm on my road to 1,000 subs on YouTube. It's gonna make a really big difference, guys. I know this has been really well received in the community playing this build. A lot of people are loving the new way to play Runemaster and really be able to push those high corruptions with not playing Plasma Orb and Hydra. So if that's one of you guys, just consider supporting the channel. It's free to like the video. It's free to sub to the YouTube channel. And then maybe if you guys get some extra free time, you can check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/pinchingloaf. But I appreciate all of you guys. I spent way too much time sitting at my computer today, so I'm going to head out, and I will catch you guys in my live stream most likely tomorrow. So I stream almost every day, guys, so I will catch you there. All right, see you later.